Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. I am MongoSlade. Today we're going to talk about the battle between AEW and NXT from November the 6th, 2024, and Dave Meltzer's ridiculous excuses for what occurred, and that those things are not really even valid. But first, I really want to do a quarter-by-quarter breakdown of the battle between the two. Now, some people care more about the 18 to 34, which of course is something that we can discuss. We could look at that as well, but most of us are looking at the overall viewership. So if you look at the overall viewership, this of course comes from WrestleNomics. The shows start at about the same, 666,000 for NXT. I'm sorry, 666,000 for Dynamite. 665,000 for NXT. And that's for the first 15 minutes. NXT actually goes up within 15 minutes to 674,000, while Dynamite plummets to 575,000. So NXT started with Lola Vice versus Jada Parker in its introduction, while AEW started with a promo segment from the Hurt Business, or the Hurt Syndicate, and Swerve Strickland, and then went into a tag team match between Darby Allin and Orange Cassidy versus Claudio Castagnoli and Pac. So you have the relatively unknown Lola Vice and Jada Parker, who are relatively new. Jada Parker's push is very young, versus the much established guys in AEW. So if you're an AEW fan or a wrestling fan in general, you know more about the 5 or 6 guys that have been featured in AEW's first 15 minutes. You have Shelton Benjamin, who's been around for 20 years. Lashley and MVP have also been around for 20 years. Claudio, who was Cesaro for a decade. And then Orange Cassidy, who has been on top of AEW for 4 or 5 years. And Darby Allin, who's been a solid top guy for AEW for 4 or 5 years. And they were both outdrawn by 2 rookie girls in a hardcore match. Think about that. Lola Vice, now we know the thickness between Lola Vice and Jada Parker. They put the booty out there first. You can't really compete with that. But from a wrestling fan's perspective, a non-gooner perspective, your top angle as well, because Claudio and Pac are part of your top angle. They got outdrawn by Lola Vice and Jada Parker. Now, the next 15 minutes was 674 for NXT, 575 for Dynamite. In that same 15 minutes, we got the continuance of Lola Vice versus Jada Parker, a promo between Ethan Page and Ridge Holland, Kalani Jordan and Rob Van Dam do a promo, and the Tony D'Angelo family angle with Nunzio. Over on Dynamite, which got 575, they continued the Darby Allin and Orange Cassidy versus Claudio Castagnoli and Pac match, a Jon Moxley Death Riders promo, the conglomerations, and a commercial. But both of them had commercials in it. So again, you have, Rob Van Dam, of course, is a big star. This was an NXT / ECW nostalgia show, even though it really only featured one ECW talent in the ring. So Rob Van Dam appeared here, and NXT's ratings actually went up from the previous 15 minutes. So the show actually not only held audience, but increased, while AEW plummeted. All right, it just fell through the floor. Okay, so now they're below what they started for AEW. So the next 15 minutes, which will be the third quarter, 653 for NXT, so it took a hit. 516 for Dynamite. 516. So during that 15 minutes, Wesley versus Javon Evans begins. The post-match with Rob Van Dam, you have Robert Stone, Eddie Thorpe, Ava, and a commercial. For AEW, you have Ricochet, MVP, Bobby Lashley, Shelton Benjamin, the Learning Tree versus the Conglomeration. This was a hardcore match, if I remember correctly, which included, ladders and chairs and a bunch of other stuff. So Chris Jericho. So you have Ricochet, who is relatively new to AEW. He's only been there 2 months. MVP, Bobby Lashley, and Shelton. Lashley, this is his second appearance in AEW. Shelton Benjamin, this is his fourth appearance in AEW. So relatively new guys for AEW who's been around for a long time that the fans should know. Versus, again, a 19-year-old rookie in Javon Evans on NXT. And Wes Lee, who spent most of his career in TNA. And then you had a appearance by Rob Van Dam, who didn't really do anything except stand outside the ring. So if you want to use the ECW excuse, it's not going to work. All Rob Van Dam did was stand outside the ring. All right. So the next quarter, which is quarter 4, NXT takes another dip, a bigger dip, to be quite honest. And Dynamite actually increases. So NXT took 596,000 viewers, while Dynamite took 535,000 viewers. So during NXT's downtime, they had 2 commercials, but they also had the Rhino angle, because Rhino sucks. So Rhino ran people off as per the usual. You put this level of talent on your product, of course nobody's going to watch it. But you also had a promo segment featuring Julia, Stephanie Vakor, Kalani Jordan, Zarya, Jordan Grace, etc. But you had 2 commercials in that time. Dynamite only had 1 commercial, but they continued the Learning Tree versus the Conglomeration. Jon Moxley had another backstage promo, and this was the beginning of Malachi Black versus Adam Cole. So they continued a hardcore match and then went into a premiere match between 2 guys everybody should know, Malachi Black and Adam Cole. And their rating went up about 15,000 viewers. Dynamite still lost a quarter, but at least it improved and it got a little bit closer. Now there's about 60,000 viewer difference between the 2 brands. NXT takes another dip in the next quarter, but Dynamite takes a plummet during the next quarter. 588,000 viewers for NXT, 511,000 viewers for Dynamite. So NXT once again dips in viewers, and what went on through this 15 minutes. Bubba Ray Dudley and Trick Williams versus Ethan Page and Ridge Holland, and it had a commercial. So what you hear from so many people who are making excuses is that it was the ECW nostalgia that was kicking AEW in the ass. But if you actually look at this, the ECW nostalgia actually isn't doing them any favors. Rhino was in the previous segment, it went down. Bubba Ray Dudley is in a match here, it went down. But when you look at Dynamite, it went into the toilet again. This is Malachi Black versus Adam Cole, the match which, of course, continued from the previous segment. And this is at 9 o'clock. All right. So both went down from their previous highs, but Dynamite dipped quicker than NXT did. So then things get even worse for AEW. NXT, of course, went down for the next segment. 563,000 viewers for NXT, which had 2 commercials. Dynamite went down to 469,000 viewers. Now, understand, Dynamite started with 666,000 viewers. Here it is, the 9:15 to 9:30 hour, they're down to 469,000 viewers. What did Dynamite have? They had an MJF backstage angle, which of course followed the Malachi Black Adam Cole match. They had promos from Jay White, Hangman Page, Chris Statlander, Camille, Mercedes Moné, and a Christian Cage Hook live promo in the ring. What did NXT have? They had the post-match angle where Devon Dudley and Bubba Ray Dudley and Trick Williams put Ethan Page through a table. There was the Carmen Petrovich, Shani the Adonis angle, the Fatal Influence, Cora Jade and Roxanne Perez backstage promo, the Nunzio versus Tony D'Angelo match, which of course, again, lost viewers. And then there was the Shawn Spears, Jensen, Regal, Lexis King, backstage angle, and 2 commercials. So things are not looking good for AEW. They're losing a lot of viewers very quickly. But things go back up for both parties in the 930 to 945. NXT skyrockets back to 590,000 viewers for Nikita Lyons promo, Ava, Axiom, Nathan Fraser angle, and an ad break. Dynamite went up to 498,000 viewers. They were doing the patriarchy, which is Christian, in the ring with Hook, Don Callis, Penelope Ford versus Jamie Hayter. So Jamie Hayter and Penelope Ford, which was the only match, essentially bumped ratings more than Malachi Black versus Adam Cole. Yep. That happened, and Nikita Lyons actually bumped the ratings for NXT. I know people hate her, but it is what it is. So the final quarter of the show was the main event. The main event for NXT went back up to the near where they started. 625,000 viewers. Now, NXT started with 665,000 viewers. Their main event went up to 625. That means that the main event is what people came to see. What was the main event? The women's 10-man tag. Cora Jade, Roxanne Perez, and Fatal Influence versus Julia, Jordan Grace, Kalani Jordan, and Stephanie Vacker and Zarya. Meanwhile, AEW's main event is lower than anything else on the show. The main event was Powerhouse Hobbs and Ricochet versus Konosuke Takeshita and Kyle Fletcher. Kyle Fletcher, who they've been building for the last couple of weeks as a premier rival to Will Ospreay. Ricochet, who has only been in the company 2 weeks. Powerhouse Hobbs, who was a surprise tag partner because they used it to the surprise tag partner as a draw here. Who could it be? And Konosuke Takeshita, who they've been building and had pinned Will Ospreay, just won a championship. And they couldn't outdraw the women of NXT. And then, of course, AEW had an overrun, which only went up by 5,000 viewers, where they did the Powerhouse Hobbs match continued with Adam Cole, Mark Davis, Lance Archer, etc., doing all run-ins. So, AEW got their ass cooked by mainly the women of NXT. The 2 highest rated segments in NXT featured the women. That would be Lola Vice versus Jada Parker in 2 segments, which started at 665 and went up to 674. And then the main event, which went up to 625. So the women of NXT is actually what led NXT to the victory, not the ECW nostalgia. This is just me looking at, the information that has been provided to me. So the 18 to 49, I'm sorry, kind of bears it out exactly what we said before. You see that there was a huge jump. This was the major difference. But in the 18 to 49, the biggest jumps were between Lola Vice and Jada Parker. And then it goes up quite a bit for Wesley and Javon Evans. And that was the highest rated match on television in the 18 to 49. Now, the 18 to 49 is a little bit closer. I think it was a 0.17 for NXT versus a 0.16 for Dynamite. And if you actually look at the chart, it's pretty close. They're even in the 9:15 to 9:30 hour. Dynamite actually wins the 18 to 49 in the 9:30 to 9:45 hour because they had a match in the ring, which was Penelope Ford and Jamie Hayter. And then NXT pulls away again for its main event, which is the 9:45 to 10 o'clock hour. So it was close, mostly because during the time frame between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, NXT had a lot of promos, and people kind of bled out through the promos. And then, of course, the Bubba Ray Dudley and Trick Williams versus Ethan Page and Ridge Holland match, which actually went down in viewers from the previous segment. And then it dropped even further for the package of promos that happened later. While AEW, they lost some viewers, but they maintained for the most part. So it looks closer than it really was in the 18-49. And what we got from this was Dave Meltzer's excuses for why this occurred. It's embarrassing, but I want everybody to get a full understanding of what kind of person this guy is. So Dave Meltzer reports NXT beat AEW last night, 619 and a .17 for NXT, 523.16 for AEW. NXT does have the edge, being in 9% more homes as a network station. And wait a second. Let's talk about this for a second before we move on to his next excuse. Again, like I said, it wasn't the ECW nostalgia, which I know some people have used that excuse. It wasn't that. It was the women, actually. Second, when you look at the average viewers and the cable broadcast power of both CW and TBS, well, of course, take into account NXT is preempted because of the election. So NXT is on a Wednesday, not on its normal Tuesday night. And TBS is the ranked 14th or 15th cable station in all of America, with 638,000 average viewers according to Google. The CW they ranked it 14th or 15th cable and broadcast networks, with an average of 702,000 viewers. So CW has a higher average viewership than TBS. But if you look at Dynamite's viewership was 523. The average for TBS is 638. That means neither show actually reached TBS's viewership average. Okay? Now, CW, according to Google, their primary audience is not even male, it's female. 18 to 34, which is why all of the TV shows on there are essentially dramas. And they've started trying to have more sports and action-based content. So that makes no sense that you would say, oh, it's a 9% more homes. Who cares? These are wrestling fans. They know both shows are on, right? You would think that people will watch AEW because notoriously that's how it's been when they've gone head to head, except for the last 2 or 3 times when NXT has essentially won. Now, Dave Meltzer's next tweet is pretty ridiculous because he says, if I worked at TBS, I say AEW won. Warner Bros. Discovery, when it does internal ratings, it is based on the 18-49 as a percentage of homes that get the station. I've seen copies in the standings how they would have it, which is the statistically fair way to look at it. It would be 0.39 to 0.38, but I don't work at TBS. So he's saying that, well, all they care about is the 18-49. Well, they lost that too. They lost the 18-49. They lost the 18-49, sir. So he's saying, well, if you're TBS, this is a win. Is it? Is it a win, sir? How? Now, you could say it was close. It was much closer in the 18-49 than it was in the overall viewership. But a loss is a loss. It doesn't matter if it's 1 point or 0.1 points or whatever the case may be. They still lost. They got fewer viewers than NXT, even in the 18-49. So there is zero excuse for what's happening here. So it wasn't the ECW nostalgia. You have guys like Moxley who have been running an angle for weeks. Adam Cole just came back into the ring, so he's featured more than ever. And people should know who he is, and there should be fan energy around him and his return. Lashley just debuted. Ricochet's been there only for 2 months and worked in the main event. And that still didn't work. In fact, it backfired as Ricochet was dominated in the main event by Cora Jade and Zarya. So there's that. So let's get into Bryan Alvarez, because I don't necessarily like what he had to say either. And we're going to talk about this as well, since we're going to do the big battle of AEW versus NXT. Somebody should be keeping score of how many wins each team has. I'm pretty sure AEW is still up from their monumental run in 2020 and 2021 where they kicked NXT's ass every week. I'm sure somebody is keeping track of this, but NXT is on a winning streak. They won like 3 weeks or 3 times in a row now, I think. Maybe 4. So let's hear what Alvarez has to say.
Story of the night was, they went head-to-head. NXT won. NXT won in viewership and 18-49 on Dynamite's day, head-to-head. I thought Dynamite was going to win, but they did not. You know what's funny is NXT and AEW started with the exact same viewership. Exactly the same.
Interesting.
They started at 666 and 6.
Yeah, so he says he thought that Dynamite was going to win. Well, what would make you think that? Except for your misplaced faith in AEW. There's always a chance that they can win as you see, the shows are pretty much equal in how they their viewerships. Except NXT is in more of a bounce back than AEW. And AEW has, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, far more in terms of investment.
65, and NXT went up in quarter 2, and AEW went way down. There's a bunch of people that have decided if AEW and NXT are on, we're going to watch WWE, which was not the case 4 years ago, but it is the case now.
All right, so I didn't like that end part, that if NXT is on and AEW is on, they're choosing WWE, because that was a nice little, I know he probably didn't mean to do that, but it's a nice little verbal jujitsu. This is not necessarily WWE. This thing wasn't loaded with main roster stars, which I think one of NXT's final victories was, that they put Undertaker and John Cena and all them on there. And that was deeply problematic for AEW, but they kicked them in the balls and won anyway. This was NXT proper. This is NXT where most of the talent featured on the show are relatively unknown. And there was sporadic appearances between, like Dawn Marie, who people haven't seen in a while, but she's not like some huge draw, right? You had Rhino, who of course is not a huge draw. He sucks. Bubba Ray Dudley worked a match and actually the viewership went down. Rob Van Dam only did a cameo. He did 2 cameos on this show. And it's unfair to just say, well, they're watching WWE, which wasn't the case 3 or 4 years ago. And there's a reason for that. A couple of weeks ago, I made the comment about there being more episodes of NXT than more episodes of ECW. NXT as a product has been running as an individual product for over 10 years. You go back to the days of takeovers, that was 2014 when Kevin Owens and all those guys, Finn Balor or whatever, came to WWE. That was 2013, 2014. So it's been 10 years of NXT. During most of NXT's run, it was a new, fresh product featuring new, fresh talent, doing different things in a different presentation than main roster WWE. And there was a lot of energy around NXT. And then AEW happened. And AEW, which took place in 2019, of course, so this was 5 years into NXT's heyday, they took the energy and the rebel spirit that NXT had formulated, mixed it with how excited people were for like New Japan and indie wrestling, and they mixed all that stuff together, and AEW dominated NXT. It gutted the brand. It got so bad. And look, NXT was still having the superior show, in my opinion. Even when guys like Aleister Black and Adam Cole and Finn Balor and Tommaso Ciampa and even Johnny Gargano, when all of those guys were featured on NXT, I still felt like week to week, NXT was probably a better show. Then the pandemic hit. AEW actually did better during the pandemic than NXT did, which led to, coming out of the pandemic, Vince gutted NXT and rebooted it as NXT 2.0. And it took a while for the new characters to catch on, the new presentation to catch on. But eventually it did, which is why we are in a situation that we're in now. Meanwhile, AEW had its hottest run between 2019 and 2021. And then it kind of went mainstream when Punk came in, and Danielson and Adam Cole and a bunch of people from NXT, guys who were featured on that NXT product that AEW was beating every week. They brought those guys in, and the viewership actually suffered for it. So it must have been the talent that was being featured, because TV ratings plummeted once NXT started running head-to-head with AEW. You had guys like Finn Balor being outdrawn by Joey Janela. And what was that dancing person? Sonny Kiss. All of these people would rather watch that than watch Matt Riddle and Damian Priest, etc. There was no excuse for that, except that AEW was a fresher product. People was more excited. There was more energy around it. And then, of course, it hit a plateau, which is when CM Punk came in. This allowed them to do bigger and better events, leading, of course, to All In 2023, which is at Wembley Stadium. From that point forward, you started seeing a noticeable decline, because part of that was because CM Punk left. Another part of it was due to the civil war of the Punk fans versus the Elite fans, and Tony Khan taking a stance finally and picking a side of who was going to, be best for the company. Then you started having all of these long-term hiatuses. Kenny Omega would go away for a long time. MJF went away for a long time. Moxley went away for a long time. And that's still stuff that's happening today. Guys who are perfectly healthy, who are not doing anything on the show. They're sending videos or they're doing backstage promos. And 5 years into its run, AEW has lost that young, fresh energy that they had just a few years before. The fans are a lot more discontented. The media landscape that really helped them, during their first couple of years, which was a lot of the people who were mad at Vince and hated the WWE, that's partially true. But again, AEW's existence didn't damage Raw and SmackDown that much. It damn near killed NXT. Now, when people start having, and that's why I don't like what Alvarez said, is that everybody tries to say people were sick of Vince and they were tired of Vince and yada, yada, yada. It didn't damage Raw and SmackDown that much. The existence of Dynamite didn't hurt Nan WrestleMania. No real big events. WWE was actually worse during when AEW first booted up than the time, afterwards. So 2019 is, one of the worst years in WWE history, especially for viewership and in the building gates and stuff like that. They were pathetic. 2018, 2019. AEW starts in 2019. And that was it. Then, of course, COVID happens in 2020. So nobody has any fans except AEW, who is sneaking fans in. Of course, nobody talked about that, but whatever. Coming out of that, 2021, WWE picked back up and they got hot again. You know, off the back mostly of the Bloodline story. 2022, things take up to the next level because Cody is there. And he is a big part of the show. I know people don't think so, but he is. But AEW has done nothing but plummet since then. What's the difference? It's not Triple H's booking is so great. Not necessarily. The product has been hot largely on the main roster where things, once it picked back up and got back to normal, you know, it wasn't really damaged that much by the appearance of AEW. Just like the main roster wasn't really damaged or hurt or helped by the popularity of NXT. Indie wrestling fans and hardcore fans of New Japan and all that stuff, they don't really damage WWE when they go away. They take a hit, of course. But WWE's main audience isn't the hardcore internet fans. People like JD from New York and Solomonster and all those people and all their followers. Those people can hate Raw and SmackDown every week, and Raw and SmackDown is not really damaged that much by the hatred that they got. And these guys did that. There was tons of negative stuff about WWE from these very large accounts. And Raw and SmackDown was not damaged that much. Especially since most of these guys hated Roman Reigns, and Roman Reigns is the reason everybody watching the fucking shows anyway. So, there's always going to be that disconnect between the WWE audience and that hardcore audience. What happened is that AEW lost their hardcore audience. They ran people off. And there was a reason for that. A lot of that had to do with CM Punk and how Tony Khan handled that situation. A lot of that has to do with their talent being injured. A lot of that has to do with talent taking excessive amounts of time off. They only work one day a week. Why do they need so much time off? Another big issue is the booking. Who wins, who loses, who gets a push. Not pushing people at the right time, not putting the right people over, not finding and recruiting the right talent. Talent recruitment is a big issue for AEW. Because now people are talking about how they need a developmental league because of WWE ID and all this kind of stuff. They need a developmental now. We told you that in 2020, and you were talking about how terrible the warehouse idea is. You don't make stars in a warehouse. Now people want AEW to have a developmental league. Well, that should be Ring of Honor. Maybe it should be. But ultimately, people were trying to tell you, hey, this is a good young guy. You should, Hobbs is perfect, If you had invested in Hobbs 3 or 4 years ago, kept it consistent, he'd be a top guy right now. He'd probably be drawing you some money. But no, you decided you were going to bring in, Daniel Garcia or Wheeler Yuta, and he's going to be the top guy. More busted up guys from Japan. He's going to be a top guy even though he can't speak the language. More crossovers with Mexicans who don't speak the language. And I like Lucha Libre, and I don't even have a problem with Japanese wrestling, but the American audience don't know who these people are, and they can't communicate with them. And then sometimes they don't even stick around long enough for that to matter anyway. Meanwhile, NXT is bringing in international talent, but they're giving the international talent time to develop, getting the audience incrementally associated with them, and you're seeing positive outcomes. There's no reason why Jada Parker and Lola Vice should be outdrawing your top guys who've been around for 5 years. There's no reason why a 10-man tag full of women, one of whom is Cora Jade, and another one is Jasmine Nix, who probably people wouldn't be able to pick out of a lineup, is outdrawing your main events. The reason is that NXT has energy. A lot of that is Trick Williams. A lot of it is the young, fresh talent. Even if they have mid-carders like Ethan Page there. Call it like you see it. It's not that Vince is gone, so everything's great now. It's AEW coughed up their advantage. They brought in all these old Ring of Honor guys, all these old busted up New Japan guys, and started running matches. This was great 15 years ago. It ought to be great today. They just did it what was this Wednesday with Malachi Black and Adam Cole? They had a great match on NXT. We just run it back again with no storyline, no angle, no reason for it to occur outside of Adam Cole has to have a match. So there, and that's problematic. That's the issue. That's your issue. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later.